What's up, guys? This is Jeff. You may also know me as TSX Trader, the head trader and owner of Livestreamtrading.com. Today, we're going to talk about some setups. We're going to talk some shop on SPY. We're just going to have some fun. It's been a minute since I've loaded up this YouTube channel and put some content on it. So let's roll the intro and get right into it. Okay, guys, before we get into some setups and talking some shop, I just want to address why I have not been posting on YouTube for a while now. You'll notice that the channel has been sort of quiet. I think about a year ago, maybe I posted a video, and then maybe two more since then, just very sporadically, just when I feel like I have the energy to do it. For those of you that are part of our trading group, you'll know that I do about a 45-minute daily recap webinar each day with a bunch of educational material. Quite frankly, by the time I'm done trading for the entire day, I live stream almost all day long. By the time I've done that members only video, posted it up, I don't really have much energy left for making YouTube content, but I really do want to catch back up with you guys, give you some ideas on what we've been up to lately, and hopefully give you some ideas on how you can improve your trading going forward. First things first, you'll notice that I'm looking at a SPY chart. I've always paid a little bit of attention to what the overall market is doing. But for those of you that know me well, know that I've put a lot of focus, mainly focusing on small cap stocks over the last 7 or so years, mainly due to the fact that the edge was very strong in them. I had a bulletproof system that I was using on a daily basis with these small cap stocks, and while I still could find myself maybe trading them again in the future, it just does not feel like right now is a good time to be trading them. And what I found was that there just isn't enough intraday opportunity anymore. The volume's starting to die off quite a bit. I think there's less participants in the market now than there was, obviously, during the sort of boom and bust, we'll call it, during 2020 to 2022 during the COVID, during the pandemic. And I've actually found that there's just a lot more intraday opportunity, a lot more liquidity, and I'm having a lot more fun on a daily basis, focusing on mainly trading SPY, which is just one ticker, one symbol that really does it all. It's got all the things that we need to have good trading days on a daily basis. We got lots of volume, unbelievable amounts of volume, essentially unlimited liquidity, getting in and out of positions with any size you need. Practically can do it, any given time of day with no real issues. So scalability is huge with SPY. The only downfall that some of you might be thinking is like, hey, Jeff, I can't trade SPY because my account isn't big enough. So there are a couple workarounds that you can use. For example, one is you could try to trade a leveraged version of SPY, something like TQQQ, which does follow SPY, but it trades at around $20 a share, which is obviously quite a bit cheaper. Now, this wouldn't have as much volume as SPY itself, and it might not be as good as trading SPY, but generally it really follows the moves pretty much the same. So if you have a signal on SPY, you're very likely going to have a similar signal setting up across TQQQ. And I can just show you side by side really quick, see how close these things really do trade. They're pretty much carbon copy of each other. So here's the 1 minute chart from 9:30 to 10 a.m. And here it is over here on TQQQ. So very similar, almost identical. SPY, I think SPY moves a little bit better. I know the SPY is a little bit more liquid. I would personally prefer, if I had to choose, to trade SPY over TQQQ, but this is definitely a good option if you want to get into ETF trading and trade stuff that's more liquid, doing more volume, and most importantly, allow you to get bigger moves where you're actually going to get a lot of follow through and not just sort of what we've been seeing in small caps for the last few months where you get kind of one little move to the downside and then kind of stops everyone out and traps longs and kind of trap shorts and like rinse repeat throughout the entire day. That type of trading can get pretty exhausting. And the third option is options trading, where you can actually just trade contracts instead of shares. I think that's a really interesting route to go when it comes to trading SPY, because you can actually day trade the contracts the same way that you would day trade shares, and it's actually really simple. We have a couple videos explaining exactly how to do that on our website, but it's very straightforward. It's really the same as you'd be trading stock, except for you're just intraday trading the options contracts. For example, this is a 394 put contract. which was the result of a SPY short signal that we had today at 395.34. And that was just after 10 a.m. this morning. And so while I called out the trade for our chat room on this, I'll give the setup on the underlying. I also reminded people that I am looking at these 394 contracts and sort of posted the setup on this as well, which was a 157 buy, risking 140. So even though we're betting on SPY to go down and expecting a move lower here, when you're using options, you actually buy puts if you're shorting SPY, so that'll actually go up in value as SPY goes down. The puts contracts will go up. This is just one of like many examples of just a decent trade here. But if you look at this and kind of compare it to any small cap, I mean, you get some pretty nice moves out of these things. This was by no means even close to the biggest trade that we've seen in the last week or so, but this is just one example of many of a really clean setup that we base off the underlying SPY, and it made very, very nice move with very little chop and just no real nonsense or noise behind it. Uh, Whether you traded that signal 395.34 short on SPY or you traded the contracts, you achieved a pretty good risk reward setup. And that was one of two trades from this morning. But there's been several trades even just last week where like 2 to 3 times a week there'll at least be one or two trades where I'll trade a pivot point on SPY and get like 1, 2, or even 300% on some contracts, whether they're call or puts, just intraday, sometimes within even just 15 to 20 minutes. So I just can't say the same, unfortunately, in this market for small caps. There used to be, a time where there was a really, really huge amount of opportunity, 3 to 5 trades a day, tons of liquidity, lots of reasons to be trading them. And I'm just not seeing it right now. And I think that people with smaller accounts can start looking at other avenues to make more consistent money and much less stressful. Quite frankly, I do think that SPY is going to be difficult to trade for most amateur traders, but if you have a solid system or the right education in the right system to back it, I've been trading SPY extremely successfully with our group, finding lots of intraday setups, lots of opportunities to make a lot of good reward versus small amounts of risk, and that's essentially what we're doing day in, day out right now. So if you will take a look at some of these setups, again, you're going to see that there's a lot more follow through. So instead of like a short signal resulting in then it kind of like bouncing back, and you'll see a lot of this in the small cap space lately. It's a lot cleaner. So if the context is good and the setup is good, as in this case it was, really tight risk setup there, be able to get short and actually stay in this trade for a decent amount of time. And it really just didn't give any reason for shorts to cover. We ended up breaking well into lows going into the late morning. These contracts just went soaring up there from the 157 entry all the way up to 240. And again, this is not even really close to one of the better trades in the last 2 weeks or so. So just an example. You got to wait till things are set up neatly and tightly, and we use a very similar system to what I was using in small caps. I've made a couple of small adjustments that really helped to better suit the action on SPY. But one of the best things is that when you're just watching the same thing day in and day out, you just get better and better at it every day. You just get more and more experience with it. You know what to expect, and things become a lot easier. So that's kind of where I've been the last couple months, is just focusing entirely on mostly trading SPY. I do look at the top percentage gainers each day, and there might be a couple setups here and there. For example, MMAT there was a decent little hourly chart set up on MMAT this afternoon through 212 with risk off 205. That's the kind of setup you can play, but not a lot of follow through. I mean, maybe a little over 2 hour at best at the very top there. So certainly not. I mean, I would much rather trade these SPY contracts if I had the choice between working with a small account. You'll notice that the contracts are only 157 per contract, so even with like $1,000 account, you can still buy a few contracts here and actually make a few $100 on an intraday trade, potentially make 10-20% on your account in a single good trade like that. But yeah, like I said, obviously trading SPY can be tricky, so you have to have the right education, a good foundational trading system, and that's kind of what we do, is we help with that side of things, giving very specific setups and trade ideas that can be actionable for those that are paying attention. Um, like I said, I'll even like go as far as to draw out some of the setups, and I mean I pretty much do this for all of them, but draw up the setup that I'm looking for, show the contracts I'm looking at, what price I'm looking to buy them, and all that good stuff. And again, like that first example I showed you was a short trade. We had in the later part of the morning today a long trade. So with this one, it was actually SPY starting to bottom out. And what was going on with this was there are some pretty key levels to note. So right now on the daily chart, we had a perfect test of daily 9 EMA, which is a trend line that I use for momentum. And tested that on Friday, and today actually into the lows when we were short from the morning trade, we came really close to testing into that level. So you can see actually we tested just below it briefly in the afternoon, but before that, right there is 392 or 393 level. Again, this is a bit of a spot from you can see from Friday, and Thursday we tested below it but closed over. So it's been kind of a big area off that hourly and daily chart. And it was right around this area here. We had so we shorted up here around 395.35, risking about 20 cents. It reached all the way down to 393.20 at the best. This was where we started looking at flipping to get long. You might again be thinking, well, when you traded small caps, you normally wouldn't go long into downtrends. That's just one of the differences of trading SPY. Is quite frequently there are opportunities where it actually does make sense to maybe get long when the bigger time frames are in a downtrend. For example, and I apologize because these big wicks on TC2000 make it a little bit difficult sometimes for me to get the chart where I need it for you there, but here we go. This is kind of one of those scenarios where the hourly chart going into the late morning was extremely downside extended. It had a look to it like this, if you can just ignore the rest of this. So this is one of those situations where we've made enough of a move to the downside, and now there's multiple catalysts for the possibility of a bounce. So one of the main ones being, like we talked about, the prior day on Friday, having all that support around the low 393 level, and then coming into that level intraday without any real bounces kind of put us in a position where there was clearly a decent amount of room for at least a short-term bounce over lunch to retest. Towards the hourly chart trend, towards VWAP, and even the 15-minute chart setup looked pretty good for a bounce there. So this is one of those areas where, I'd be looking for sort of a long setup, and we actually haven't had shorts really didn't have any reason to cover at all intraday until then. It just continued to really work on that downtrend, which again, you don't see that very often in small caps lately. That clean, right? So really nice clean trend, lots of room to the downside here. Now, we've bounced off that 393 area. We've had about 20 minutes of consolidation. I really like the risk reward now. If we're looking at the possibility of a bounce play where maybe we can get, risk about that much, get a really tight setup off the 5-minute chart, and sometimes it'll get us to VWAP. Sometimes it'll get us towards that hourly chart trend that we like to watch. Sometimes it'll end up going even more. Today, it just did exactly what I expected it to. So this wasn't a home run trade. This was just a nice little trade, nice little sort of follow up to the opening short that allowed us to capture a few more points on the morning. I'll just give you a quick look at the setup here first. I mean, this is the setup on SPY. So we're kind of looking at a break of 393.55 to enter. I really like the risk reward here. Only risking about 35 cents a share, actually a little bit less than that, more like 30 off that higher low. And potential to make about $1 a share is what I was kind of thinking there. This one I do tend to go a little bit smaller, so a little bit bigger on the trades where I'm going with the trend. But sometimes when I take these ones, I just take about a third of the usual size. I still like them, but especially if the risk reward is good, but I don't put quite as much weight in them. You'll see me doing more trades that are more pivotal or with the trend, but not necessarily, definitely not counter trend trading quite often. But this is one of the situations where it definitely made sense for the reasons I explained. So many catalysts working, got that big support from Friday holding, daily charts still well in an uptrend. We've had a huge move to the downside. There was lots of room for that move back up on the hourly chart, 15-minute chart, and shorts needed to cover or at least take some profits on this flag break. So at that point, We had just covered up the initial short trade, and we were looking into the possibility of starting to get long. And I always draw out a couple of ideas of like what I'd like to see. I was kind of hoping to get like one last dip into lows, and then kind of a higher low form, and then start to set up like I drew here. You can see we didn't really get that last dip. We just ended up consolidating, so we sort of changed the idea there. You'll see that the dip reclaim setup was actually more happened a little bit later, about an hour later. That dip reclaim setup happened, and that one gave quite a bit more follow through actually, but it was right in the middle of lunch. That actually moved up towards high a day. So this one didn't do as good, but again, just a small setup, one that is a good example again of how you can use some options contracts um, and how cheap they are to actually trade these contracts. So this is we're going long on SPY on this 395, 393.55 break. So we're actually using the 394 calls. It was trading at around 393.50, so I use those 394 calls. Um, you can see how tight that chart is, man. This thing was trading at 85 cents. So I mean, geez, you don't have to have a very big account to buy 85 cents per share per contract, right? So, like I said, this one maybe not as good as the opening short trade because not quite as big on the size. And it didn't quite, I mean, it got to exactly the targets we were looking for, which was 394. Basically, we're looking for a VWAP target, which is where it got to. And I wasn't expecting a whole lot more than that because I was going to start rejecting the bigger time frames. And the bias was still short in the big picture, but just long for the short term. But you can see here the contracts were, look at the tight risk reward on these again. Pick them up at 85 long, 10-cent risk off 75, and they hit a high of 117. This wasn't as clean as the other trade, but really, if you think about at least what I've been seeing over the last few months and compare this to small caps, you can trade this like you're trading a penny stock. You're buying an 85-cent stock essentially, and you're selling it 20 or 30 minutes later at a buck 10 or a buck 15, and then just rinse and repeat. You can do the same thing just over and over again with each new setup that you have. That's if you choose to trade contracts. You certainly don't have to. You can just trade shares as well. And if you don't like trading SPY shares, they're too expensive. Again, TQQQ is an option. UVXY is not as attractive of an option anymore since they did the split. Trade's a little too cheap and not quite what I'm looking for. But um, just let's go over a few examples of trades today, just today alone. That would be very interesting on SPY. So first one we had, like we talked about, short signal up here, all the way back to lows, flip for a long here. Couple targets on that one, didn't expect much out of it, got what we expected. I didn't bother turning around to try to flip that short again because the context actually wasn't quite ready for a new short. So if anything, I'd probably expect this type of setup to potentially be a trap into weakness. So the next spot that I think that was tradable was, excuse me, but I was still here for that. At that point in the day, around 393.94 would be the next spot. Now you got kind of shorts trapped in a low a day over here. Still a little bit of room to bounce. We've stayed pretty weak throughout the morning and the afternoon, a lot of consolidation. So I kind of feel like that was a spot where shorts would kind of need to cover. And if they could break those prior lower highs at around 394.32, which it did, that'd be a good place to sell into. And then from there, we kind of just sort of kept squeezing those shorts, and it put a lot of pressure on the shorts. The only setups I saw in the afternoon, there wasn't much context-wise this afternoon, and really the goal for me is while I'm trading SPY is I'm really looking to get two trades in the morning, typically one within the first 20 minutes. So with SPY, unlike like with small caps, I typically would almost wait usually 45 or so minutes before I make my first trade because that's sort of how much time it would take to develop the chart enough to see where people are trapped long, trapped short, where they need to stop out. With SPY, it's a much different beast where you can actually get setups quite a bit earlier. So usually the first trade I try to go after is about 20 minutes into the day, if the context makes sense. Um, and then I like to try to get a trade at around 11 a.m. if the setup makes sense and the context makes sense. So usually there'll be some kind of opening trade in the first 20 minutes. If not, then probably a trade around 11 a.m., like an 11 o'clock reversal like we had today. Today, though, I actually didn't take this first flag here because the context to me actually was more of a short bias based on one of the bigger time frames that I focus a lot on, which is the 4-hour chart, which has been in a downtrend for a couple of days. I didn't really feel good about the long side, and although maybe longs could have got a little bit of a scalp out of that, I was actually more interested in watching for longs to get trapped. Also, like we discussed earlier, coming into today, based on where we are at with the daily chart currently, I expected today to be more of a range bound day, meaning we're most likely we're going to stay within the parameters of Friday's highs and lows. So I wasn't expecting today to be a big breakout day or a big breakdown day. I was actually expecting today to be an inside day between like 393 to 398 area. So we kind of like established the top of the range in the morning, which was around, again, Friday's highs up there and that double top. So I was way more interested today in actually looking for longs to get trapped buying into the top of a range and then turning around and looking for the best short signal I could find, which happened to be right in this area here. But then again, like because it's more of a range bound day today, guys, once we get to the bottom of that range, which we did around, we didn't get quite all the way to the bottom of the daily chart range, but once we got into territory where we were starting to show bottoming action off of Friday's support, now I'm kind of looking to go long in hopes to, get the setup to play back towards the middle of the range or even back towards the upper part of the range, which is what ended up happening later in the day. The afternoon was a bit of a challenge because there actually wasn't. We usually have like a really good power hour setup most days out there. Today, the context was kind of lousy for that. It just wasn't quite the day for that power hour setup. The only setup I saw for me that made sense based on how I trade and what I look for in my trades was potentially a short, and that was off this area right here. And that's because ever since we kind of broke into those lows and started trapping shorts in the low a day here, shorts have been kind of I'm just going to move to a 5-minute chart. You can see that shorts have been kind of stuck in it pretty much all afternoon at that point. So as this was moving up throughout the afternoon with higher lows, and then finally right here, that to me that was kind of the blow off where you can see the volume is pretty big. It's kind of like max pain level for shorts. Now you can kind of start looking for a lower high and then a break of trend. You can see how this trend was really important it was a really important level that was holding throughout the afternoon, really putting the pressure on those shorts. But now we're back into the upper end of the range, like we talked about. And so that would be probably the only place to me that would have made sense to get short. However, due to some conflicting context on the hourly chart, I wasn't really that attracted to that area, so it ended up being kind of for me. I just actually didn't trade the afternoon, but I put that out as an idea because it was a decent setup, a decent enough setup. At the very least, it was probably okay for a scalp, but I figured we kind of hang on to that VWAP area, and it probably wouldn't give a very good risk reward outcome. But I do like the way things are tightening up on these bigger time frames, and what that's going to lead us into here is what might we be looking for, tomorrow or going forward this week. So let's look at a weekly chart time frame and a daily chart time frame. I have the weekly chart up top. Each candle represents a week of trading action, and down here each candle is a day. Only thing I'll ask you guys is just to try to ignore these tail wicks. That is a data problem with TC2000. It's really more like this. So we're kind of tightening up over that 390-ish area. And as of right now, let's just back it up a little bit. So we've been in a downtrend for a while. The biggest time where even when I was mostly focused on small caps that I really noticed a big shift in the market, the biggest signal that I saw from bull market to bear market territory for me was actually right here at around 455. If you scroll back to my Twitter, January 2022, I talked about it on there. It was even more confirmed. We retested and rejected that area. So we're talking macro view, weekly chart. This was a very, very big shift when we broke under 456 area on the weekly chart, and it was even bigger when we retested and rejected it. That's where things really, really started to shift into bear market territory. And if you go over to this weekly chart and you draw a flag line like this, you can see that we're still in that bigger picture downtrend on the weekly chart. But we have, at a few different points over the last year, we have reclaimed that weekly chart trend briefly here, and then again briefly we got back over that prior resistance became new support. We kind of flagged for a few weeks here. So you can see a few periods where while we're still in a bear market, we're still in a downtrend, it was more bullish price action for those days in those weeks, right? And most recently, we saw this one coming a couple weeks ago. We had, I think, too many. Honestly, I think too many puts players and too many bears chasing into way too much weakness down here. We ended up reclaiming this key level around 370, reclaimed it. The weekly chart flagged, was super short-term long bias there. So now we're kind of in an area where we're consolidating. We've actually been tightening up. It hasn't been the most exciting range necessarily over the last maybe week, just because we're getting kind of tight on the daily chart. You can see how we're really tightening up here on that daily. So here are the levels that I think are really interesting. 390, there's no doubt about it. That's a big level for me. That's been acting as resistance. It has become since new support over the last couple of weeks. I will be watching very closely if we have any kind of setup that resembles a break below of that level, especially if there's stat catalysts, such as a bigger time frame trend break, a weekly chart reversal, etc. As of right now, though, 390 level is holding strong. We are in an uptrend on the weekly chart, and we are indeed, as of today, as of right now, in an uptrend on the daily chart also. You can see the wider flag line is still has a ways to go before we can really talk about that being tested. But if you go into maybe like just go over the last like a few months, a little bit tighter time frame instead of looking at the big picture, there are some other flags that are starting to potentially set up here over the next few days, maybe even tomorrow, but over the next few days, we're definitely going to be getting tighter, guys, where we're going to be looking for much bigger moves. So today, and Friday and Thursday, those were good trading days where we still have trades where we're going to get a few targets here and there, but not necessarily days where we're getting massive trend holds and bigger macro moves. So one of the big things that you want to focus on if you're going to be putting your focus on trading something like SPY is you want to be in tune with what's happening on the macro, the bigger picture time frames, as well as what's happening with the smaller. And that's the way we've always been trading anyways, but it's particularly important to understand when, like today, is going to be a day that it's most likely we're going to trade within a range. That way, we're not looking for example, we're not trying to buy breakouts into the top of the range that are likely to fail, and we're not trying to short into the bottom of the range, which is likely to trap. We're looking to capture moves more on a range-bound day today, like inside this range, where we can trade from top to bottom and then from bottom back to top. But we're not expecting big breakouts or big breakdowns today because, technically speaking, we are kind of tightening up on that daily chart. We're in an uptrend on the daily, we're in an uptrend on the weekly chart, and we're waiting to find out what the next move is. I don't know what the next move is, but I can tell you that once we have the setup, I'll have a very good idea. As of right now, weekly chart is catching up, so it's not like there's that much room, even if we do break at some point under that 390 area. That weekly chart's so close below, that trend is holding so close below that it could find a little support under there. But as the daily chart tightens up today and tomorrow, we are going to be watching closely for setups in both directions. But particularly, I think that if you look just over the last 3 days, 3 or 4 days, you can draw a flag line like this, sort of across back from like the 15th, like early last week. And you can see that we are kind of in territory here where it's quite possible that we might be looking to try to flag back to the upside. The issue today was that 4-hour chart was acting as a lot of resistance, and that's why today we were more range bound and I wasn't looking to go long. But if we open over that 4-hour chart tomorrow and flag, I mean, I definitely wouldn't put it past myself to look at a long setup if we had the right intraday signal. Also, some things that I would find very interesting is if we do a little bit more consolidation in that daily chart. I think that this actually could potentially look a whole lot better in the macro view, let's say Wednesday or Thursday. Once again, I'm just going to have to clean up this chart because it's actually more like this. And yeah, I mean, if we get like a couple of candles inside, like let's say like tomorrow we have sort of another range day, then definitely Thursday I'd be watching very closely for multi-day setups that would lead me to either a breakout long side trade back up to the top of the bigger picture flag line, or potentially a daily chart reversal back under the daily chart trend. So again, today is only Monday. I could see maybe an inside day tomorrow unless we set up a multi-day flag that really follows through off that 4-hour and hourly chart. But Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, or even early next week is where we could really start seeing some sparks fly in either direction. I'm still a bear really right now for the bigger picture, but as far as what we're seeing like in the yearly chart. But as far as what we're seeing like intraday over the last week, daily chart, weekly chart, I'm not really ready to be a perma bear yet. I think we still could try to flag again. I think we could try to maybe retest the top of this bigger flag line that again we haven't really had another test of for a while. So if that daily chart does in fact set up over the next few days, the next move could be to try to retest towards this bigger time frame trend line, and then perhaps from there we end up doing a little bit of a fail flag and then start moving lower. And that, as far as a macro view goes, to me that's a pretty reasonable look. For me, a very unreasonable look is trying to short somewhere down here into all this weakness. But now we've had weeks now of corrections where we've had shorts all stopping out and kind of definitely options players that didn't use big enough or long enough expiry starting to get taken out of their positions. A lot's happening over the last few weeks that's kind of helping this chart reset back up to eventually make some more interesting macro plays. So whether it's going to be a tight setup in here that results in a flag and a test of the bigger flag line, then maybe we just reject it and go back right back into full-on bear bias, short bias territory. Get back under that weekly chart 9 EMA trend and the daily chart. That would be really interesting for some bigger picture looks at some outdated maybe puts if you're interested in that sort of thing. But as of right now, we're tightening up on the daily chart. I keep my bias open to both sides. And as far as the day trading goes, every morning I'm pretty much going to come in with an open bias. I'm going to be watching for trades on both sides. And I'll know that there's certain days that, like for example, guys, like a day like where we're having a big reversal on the daily chart. We're breaking below some daily chart support, and there's a big reason for people to be selling. Well, in a day like this, I'm almost going to exclusively be looking at short setups. And also in a day like that, I'm not going to be expecting a range day. I'm going to be expecting a big trending day, in this case to the downside. So I'm going to be looking for short setups and be looking to make bigger moves on them where I'm holding longer. Flip that upside down. If we end up on a day like this, where we've been tightening up on the daily chart, and now we're breaking through a daily chart flag line and shorts need to start covering, I'm going to be way more looking at almost exclusively long bias trades on these days and paying really close attention to actually trying to trail them bigger because there's going to be more potential for follow through. Now, the days like today and perhaps this day here, these 2 days here, these are what I call range days. Where on the macro view, the daily chart view, it doesn't really make sense for bigger moves to be happening. So I'm going to be avoiding going long near the top of this range, avoiding going short near the bottom, and keeping my bias open and trading intraday, probably both long and short on those types of days, with a slight bias towards the long side because of the daily chart uptrend that we're in at that point. So those are a few ideas, guys, to kind of get you going for the week. But if you want, real-time actionable trades, intraday alerts with real-time analysis, that's kind of what I do best, is like in real time during the day. I can get you those trades and ideas on the stream and in our chat room with a lot of detail. I'll draw the setups out and give exact stop points and entry points that I'm going to personally be using. If those are trades that you feel like you agree with, then you can always choose to tag along with them. But mostly the idea is just to get you guys educated on how to properly and successfully trade these types of setups and properly manage your risk and all that good stuff that makes trading a lot of fun. So if you're interested in learning some of that cool stuff, come check us out. Actually, this week we're going to run Black Friday sale, which means the value is already really good there at $97, but I'll let you guys in at 20% less for the next week. So if you do want to give it a try, just use coupon code Black Friday. Pretty much not going to get any cheaper than that, especially with pretty much all day live streaming and daily recap webinars and so much value and so much content that we have to share with you. Like I said, over these last few years where I haven't really been posting on YouTube, I have been updating our video library on a daily basis. So there's just a lot of stuff to catch up on, a lot of tweaks that we've made to our system, and just a lot of really exciting stuff going on now that there's so much opportunity intraday to trade SPY and SPY options. I really suggest that you check it out. But if not, that's cool too. Just go ahead and hit like and subscribe. Give us a comment below. I will continue to make content like this for you guys, hopefully once or twice a week, just to give you an idea of where we're at with the bigger picture, what we're looking for, where we might be going tomorrow. Get you sort of a little bit of an idea of what we're looking at. But if you want those nitty-gritty intraday setups and signals, those trades that we're giving in real time, you know where to find us at livestreamtrading.com. All right, guys, that is it for today. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.